Hi everyone, welcome to our end of financial year STP webinar. My name's Tanya and I'm going to be your host today. I'll just cover off a few housekeeping items first before we start. You'll all be on mute to minimise any noise, and so if you do have any questions you can pop them in the Q&A section there and we'll answer these as we go through the presentation. So today's webinar is specifically for users that have been reporting to the ATO through Single Touch Payroll for the 2019-2020 financial year. If your business or any of your employees are eligible for an exemption from reporting to the ATO via Single Touch Payroll, we have a separate webinar that will step you through ending your financial year by generating payment summaries and show you how to register and start reporting to the ATO for Single Touch Payroll next financial year. You can register for that webinar via our website. In today's webinar though, we'll be covering the following. We'll start by taking a look at some end of financial year related employee and business level settings that we strongly advise you check before you start your end of year process. Now, making sure all of these settings are configured correctly will ensure a smooth and efficient end of year process. Then we'll show you the end of financial year STP Wizard, creating and lodging a finalisation event, and notifying your employees. Lastly, we'll have a look at some other miscellaneous information like ATO deadlines and what your employees can expect to see once your end of year has been finalised. Now, before we get started, I'll just also mention that all of the information I'm showing you today can also be found in our comprehensive end of financial year guide. To access this guide and any other end of financial year information, you can always use the support widget to search for any of our knowledge-based articles. The support widget can be found on any page in the payroll software. All you need to do is click on the widget and then you can enter into the search keywords for the area of the system you require help with. We have end of financial year articles on the STP Finalisation Wizard, the reconciliation, and there's also a frequently asked questions document that you can have a look at as well. Now, at the end of today's presentation, we'll be sending out a follow-up email to all of the attendees today. Now, this email is going to include a copy of the end of financial year guide, a copy of that frequently asked questions document, and also a recording of today's presentation. Okay, so first we'll look at some of the employee details that you should make sure are up to date before you start your end of year process. To check the employee details in bulk, we can use the Employee Details report. So to access this report, we'll go to the Reports tab and then down to the Employee Details report. Now here you can add to the display columns any data that you need to check and it will all display on screen. Some of the details we recommend checking include the employee's email address, the employee's tax file number, the employee's working holiday maker status, and an employee's closely held employee status. So once you've entered all of those options into the search, you can then run the report and easily see on screen any employees that may be missing or have invalid information. Now, email addresses for your employees are important because you'll be sending notifications to the employee to let them know the end of year process has been finalised and their income statements are tax ready in their myGov portal. Also, often if an employee hasn't provided the employer with their tax file number, the system will generate a special purpose tax file number. Now, often this is all ones, so you'll need to make sure that you replace that with the employee's valid tax file number. Now, if approved working holiday makers form part or all of your workforce, it's imperative that this setting is also correct. Now, the closely held option for an employee is applicable for businesses that have closely held employees being paid in the payroll file, and this option can be located on an employee's pay run defaults page. Businesses with 19 or fewer employees are exempt from reporting any closely held employees until 1 July 2021. If you have closely held employees in your business and they have been marked as closely held from the start of the financial year, this means they will not have been included in any STP events and therefore will not be included in the finalisation event. You'll need to generate payment summaries for these employees. If you do want these employees included in the STP event, you'll need to uncheck this option on the Employees Pay Run Defaults page prior to creating the finalisation event. If an employee hasn't been marked as a closely held and as a result has been included in STP events throughout the financial year, they will also be included in the finalisation event and cannot have payment summaries generated. Okay, so as well as seeing all this information on screen here, you can also export this information into an Excel spreadsheet. So you can view that information via the spreadsheet if you'd like. And the other benefit to this is if you do need to make any changes in bulk, you can do that in the spreadsheet and then import that spreadsheet back into the payroll file. Okay, so after checking all of your employees' information, we can now move on to checking over some of your business level settings. So we'll go back to the payroll dashboard. Now, the first thing we'll take a look at is for businesses that may be exempt from fringe benefits tax. If this applies to your organisation, you'll find the relevant setting on the ATO settings page. So on the ATO settings tab, right down the bottom here, there's an option here that you can tick if this employer is exempt from fringe benefits tax. So you can select the yes option. Now, once you select that, you'll then need to select the organisation type. And you'll also see you have a second option here. Now, this is for employees that are entitled to a separate cap for salary packaged entertainment benefits. The entertainment benefits amount is a grossed up cap of $5,000. If you have employees that are entitled to this, you can tick on that yes option there. And I'll show you later on in the presentation where and how you can enter in amounts for both of those reportable fringe benefits amounts. If you require any further information on any of those three settings, you can click on any of the tooltips here and they will take you to the relevant ATO website pages to explain more about each setting. So then we can just click on save there. Now, if this is relevant to your business and you do have employing entities set up in the business, you'll also need to enable that at an employing entity level as well. So if you just click into the entity, you'll see here that there's an option here for if this particular entity is also exempt from fringe benefits tax. You can click on the yes option, select the organisation type, and then if you do have any employees that are entitled to that separate cap for salary packaged entertainment benefits, you can click on the yes option there as well. And then save that information. Okay, so next we're going to have a look at the pay categories. So in particular, any pay categories you might be using to pay allowances. If you are paying allowances to your employees that need to be reported as separate allowances for Single Touch Payroll, you'll need to make sure the pay categories you have set up to pay these allowances are configured correctly. So to check the configuration for these pay categories, we'll need to go into the actual pay category, and the setting that we need to check is the payment classification. Now you'll see the different options here for the different available allowances. If you select default from here, any earnings paid using this pay category will be attributed to the employee's gross payments. Or if you select any of the other classification types, any amounts using these payment classifications will be listed separately in the STP reporting as allowances. So you can see here that I have this allowance set up for meals, so I'm going to select the allowance meals payment classification. I'll show you a bit later in the presentation what these allowances look like in the STP event. I'll also just quickly mention the JobKeeper payments that were introduced by the government in response to COVID. If this is something that your business has needed to deal with, There's nothing special that needs to be done with regards to this for the end of financial year. If you've been using our inbuilt JobKeeper functionality, the pay categories are set up as per the ATO specifications. If you've been using your own pay categories, you'll need to ensure that the payment classification has been set up as allowance other. Okay, the next thing we'll have a look at is the deduction categories. Now, if you have employees that have deductions for union fees or workplace giving, we have a specific setting that will need to be configured within the deduction category for this. So here you can see I have a deduction category set up for union fees. And if we look at the payment classification setup, you can see here I have the union and professional association fees setting selected for this one. This setting will ensure that these deductions are being identified separately. If an employee has salary sacrifice super amounts being deducted, these deductions will need to be reported separately as RESC, which is a Reportable Employer Superannuation Contributions via STP. We have a salary sacrifice deduction category already set up there, but the payment method used when setting up that deduction is what's going to influence whether or not those deductions appear as RESC in the Single Touch Payroll reporting. If the deduction has been set up to be paid manually or to a bank account, the salary sacrifice super won't be reported as RESC on the STP reporting. You can see this in a pay run and even the employee's pay run inclusion setup. So I'll show you on an employee's file. On the pay run inclusions page. So this employee here has a salary sacrifice to super deduction set up. Now the setting that we're specifically interested in is this one here. So this deduction should be paid to a super fund. And then you can select the employee's super fund here. If the deduction is set up to be paid manually or paid to a bank account, this is what will cause the issue, and these deductions will not appear as RESC on the STP reporting. So it's imperative that this setting here is paid to a super fund and select the employee's super fund here. This is exactly the same if the deduction has been added manually to the pay run. Once the deduction has been manually added to the pay run, you'll need to make sure that the payment method selected is being paid to a super fund. Setting up your salary sacrifice super deductions is not only important for STP reporting, but also when running your super payment reports. This correct setup will ensure that those amounts all appear when you go to actually pay the employee's super. We highly recommend that you do an audit of your RESC payments before starting your end of year process. The end of financial year guide has instructions on how to identify if RESC has been set up correctly and also how to fix it if required. Okay, now the next thing we're going to have a look at is the pay runs. So we'll go back to the payroll dashboard there and then down onto the pay runs tab. Now we need to make sure that all the pay runs for the financial year that we are about to process have all been finalised. Any unfinalised pay runs will appear at the top of the list here, and it's important to note that any data from unfinalised pay runs will not be included in your STP reporting, which includes your finalisation event for the end of year. So you'll need to make sure that any relevant pay runs have been finalised. So you can see here that I've got one that is not finalised, so I'll click on that pay run. Finalise the pay run, and then in turn you'll also need to make sure that you create and lodge the pay event from that particular pay run as well. So while that pay event is being submitted, we'll go back to the pay runs list, where I'll also just quickly mention the pay date of a pay run is the date that's going to be used to determine the financial year that the information from that pay run will be attributed to. Now this is a handy tip if there are any discrepancies when you are reconciling your end of year figures. You'll need to make sure that the pay date of the pay runs you are reconciling fall within the financial year that you're reconciling. Okay, now the last business setting that we're going to have a look at before we start the finalisation event is two-factor authentication. Now to access this, we can go to the Payroll Settings tab and onto the Manage Users page. You'll see the Manage Two-Factor Authentication tab here. Now, if you do want that extra layer of security for users that are submitting STP events to the ATO on behalf of the business, you'll need to firstly enable the require two-factor authentication for full access users. And then once you've enabled that setting, you'll then be presented with a couple of other options where you can set up two-factor challenges for different actions in the system. And one of those is the requirement for a two-factor challenge before lodging a pay event to the ATO, which is that bottom one there. If this setting is enabled, the user submitting the pay event will need to request a verification code and enter this into the relevant area before lodging the event. So like I said before, this just adds that extra layer of security if you require. So once you've set that up, you can then just click on Save. Okay, so that has covered off all of the employee and business level settings that we suggest you check before you start your finalisation process. And now that we've done that, we can go ahead and create the finalisation event. So to access the Finalisation Event Wizard, we can go to the Reports tab, Single Touch Payroll, now you can see a full list here of all the pay events and update events that have been submitted for this business for the selected financial year. And from here, to start the finalisation event, all you need to do is click on the Start Finalisation Process option up here in the top right hand corner, and this will launch the Finalisation Wizard. So the wizard requires you to complete a number of steps, making sure that you review all the information that populates each step as you progress through the wizard. So the first step here is to select the financial year that you wish to process the finalisation event for, and then the pay schedule. So this is going to default to the current financial year, which is 2019-2020. And then all I need to do is select the pay schedule that I'd like to start this finalisation event for. At this point, you can cancel the finalisation event if you don't wish to proceed, or you've got the next option here to take you to the next step of the wizard. On this page here, you'll need to confirm that all of this pre-populated information is correct. The finalisation event will populate with all employees attached to the selected pay schedule that have not been manually marked is final in a previous pay event. So just to clarify, this means that employees that have been marked is final as a result of being terminated in a pay run will still appear in the finalisation event. Any employees that were manually marked is final in a pay event will not appear in the finalisation event. You can see at the top of the page here, there is a warning showing you the employees that are not included in the finalisation event, because these were the ones that had been marked is final manually in a previous pay event. So that's this warning here, telling us that Wendy Brown is not appearing in this finalisation event, but she will still appear in the Excel year-to-date report for reconciliation purposes. This area will also show us any validation issues in the event. And you can see up the top here that I have deliberately triggered a validation warning so we can take a look at how to fix this. The validation warning will have the details of what the issue actually is, as well as a link to the area of the system affected by the issue, so you can click on that link and go straight to the page where you'll need to make the adjustment. If you require any further assistance or information on the issues that appear in this warning section, there's a link to our support article here, which is specifically for solving these validation issues. But for now, I'll just click on Margaret's name there. This will take me back to Margaret's employee details page. And the warning that was appearing in that event was letting us know that the address on file for this employee was too long. So we'll need to come in here and fix that up. And then once we've made that adjustment, we can save those details for the employee. And then if we go back to the finalisation event, down here there's an actions button, and within the actions button here you can see the refresh data option. So if we click on that, this will refresh all the data in the finalisation event, and you can see now that the warning for that employee's address has disappeared. So now that we've attended to the warnings that were there, there's a few other parts of the finalisation event that I'll show you. If you need to look at certain employees in the event, you can filter the view by the employee's name or a particular employing entity. And then you have all the headings across the top here explaining what all the information is. So for example, we've got the employee's name, the employing entity that the employee is attached to, the total gross. Now this is inclusive of any gross payments, RESC, allowances and lump sums. You've got the type here. Now an S here indicates a normal salary and wages employee, whereas a H here will indicate that this employee is an approved working holiday maker. Then you have the gross payments. You have the RESC column. So this is where any of those reportable employer superannuation contributions will appear. So if there are amounts in here that seem to be missing, you'll need to go back and check that deduction setup that we spoke about earlier. Then you have the SG column, which is where you'll see all of the super guarantee payments for your employees, and then the allowances. So this is where you'll see any of those allowances we talked about earlier, where we configured the pay category so that the allowance would report separately in the pay event. Now this also includes any JobKeeper payments if this is applicable to your business. Then you'll see any lump sums listed here, and then the tax withheld. Now in the tax withheld column, you need to be aware that this is inclusive of any PAYG and STSL amounts. So this does sometimes cause a bit of confusion when users are reconciling the tax withheld for their business. So the tax withheld will show separate amounts for the PAYG and the STSL in a pay run, but in reports and the STP events, just like this finalisation event, the amounts are all displayed as one total tax withheld amount. So when you're reconciling, just make sure that you bear that in mind. And then the last column here is the is final option. So this will be automatically ticked for all employees included in the finalisation event and cannot be unticked. The is final option is locked because the entire premise of a finalisation event is to mark all employees as is final, so the ATO is notified that there will be no further payments made for these employees in this financial year. This will then flag the employee as finalised with the ATO, and then the employee's income statement will be made available and labelled as tax ready. Now just above these headings, there's an actions button. We've already looked at the refresh data option in here, but there are also two other reports available from here that can be used for your end of year reconciliation. These are the Excel report and the Excel year to date report. Now the difference between the two available reports is the Excel report will show you all the information that has populated the finalisation event, but only for the employees that were included in the event as you see it on the screen here. The totals in this report will match the totals that appear at the bottom of each column on screen in the finalisation event. So all of these totals along here. The Excel year-to-date report is the report that you'll need to use for your reconciliation. The year-to-date report includes payroll data for all employees attached to that pay schedule relating to all events that have been successfully lodged with the ATO. This includes any employees that have been previously marked as final during the financial year and did not appear in the finalisation event. We strongly recommend that you perform a reconciliation at this point before you go any further with the finalisation event. We have an article specifically designed to show you how to do your reconciliation, and you can search for this via the support widget that I mentioned earlier. And then the last thing to mention on this page here are the options along the bottom. So you've got the back option, which will take you to the previous page that you're on. You've got the next option, which will take you to the next step of the wizard. And then you've also now got a save for later option. So this option will save the wizard at the page you are on in the wizard. If you use this option, you'll be taken back to the Single Touch Payroll page, where you can then filter the screen for the relevant financial year to find that saved finalisation event. So I'll click on that, and then you can see here that this is the finalisation event that we've started and we haven't yet completed. And then to go back into the finalisation event wizard, you can just click on the Continue Finalisation option. That's going to open up the wizard straight to the page that you were last on. So now we'll click on the next button, which will take us to the next step of the wizard. And this is where you can enter in any reportable fringe benefits amounts. So over on the side here, you'll notice that we've got the two options, the RFBA Entertainment and the RFBA Other. So this entertainment option is here because we selected that option on the ATO settings tab a little bit earlier for employees that are eligible for that separate entertainment benefit amount. So if you do have employees that are eligible for either of these reportable fringe benefits amounts, you can enter those amounts in here. Now you can enter them in on a per employee basis. So if you do want to enter in amounts for just one employee, you can click on the little pencil icon here, and then you can enter in the amounts here and click Save. Or if you have a number of employees in this finalisation event that do require reportable fringe benefits amounts to be entered, you can do this in bulk. So to access the bulk import function, we'll need to click on the Actions button. And you can see here now that we've got another couple of options from the Actions button. We've got exporting the RFBA template and then bulk importing the RFBA back into the finalisation event. So first of all, we'll need to export the template so that we can then enter in those amounts ready to be imported back in. So this takes us to the data extracts page and straight into the employee reportable fringe benefits page. Just make sure you've got the correct financial year selected, and then you can download that spreadsheet. We'll open that spreadsheet up. So this is what the spreadsheet will look like. Now you'll notice at the bottom of the spreadsheet that there are different tabs for all the different pay schedules that are set up in the business. So make sure you are entering the correct information on the relevant tab for the relevant pay schedule. You can enter in all the amounts for each of those pay schedules, and then you can use this same template to import that back into each of the finalisation events you do for each pay schedule. So you'll notice here we've got the RFBA Other and RFBA Entertainment options still. And then all you need to do is go ahead and enter in the relevant information. And then you can just save that spreadsheet. Now this is going to save to your downloads folder. And then if we go back to the finalisation wizard, we'll go back to this Actions button. We're going to now import the bulk RFBA file. So we can select that file from our downloads folder, confirm the upload, and then all of those amounts will populate automatically into those fields for each employee. So once you're happy with all of those amounts, you can then click on Next. And this takes us to the last step of the finalisation wizard, which is lodging the finalisation event. If you are a registered tax or BAS agent lodging on behalf of a business, you'll need to follow the same process you do with lodging other pay events where a client authority is required. So now here we'll need to read and accept the authorisation and declaration, and then you can simply tick that box to acknowledge, and then all you need to do is click on the Lodge Finalisation Event option. Finalisation event will lodge, and then we'll be taken here to the last page of the wizard, which is the Finalisation Complete. So from here you can go straight back to the STP events page, where you can see the details of the finalisation event that we just processed, or you can go back to the payroll dashboard. We'll go back to the Single Touch Payroll page. So here you can see the finalisation event is being submitted to the ATO. Now you can navigate away from this screen. You don't need to stay on this screen till the submission has been successful. You can move away from here. And the warning that we have appearing here, that's just still that warning to say that that particular employee didn't appear in the finalisation event because they had been manually marked is final in a previous pay event. And then back on the lodgement details page there, you can see that our finalisation event has been successfully submitted. So now that that finalisation event has been successful, the next thing we're going to do is send out the system-generated email notifications to the employees included in the finalisation event. So this is to let them know that their income statements can now be accessed via their myGov account. And to do this, we're going to go to the Actions button again, and there is now a Send Notifications option. Once we click on this, this is going to automatically send out the emails for all the employees that were included in the event. And there you can see all those notifications have been sent successfully. On that Lodgement Details tab here, you can see the status of the finalisation event was successful, the lodged by, so the user, the time and the date, the receipt number that you can use as a reference if you need to contact the ATO about the event, and then also the date and time that the notifications were sent. I'll also just show you what that email notification will look like for an employee. So here you can see the email. So this is basically just saying to the employee that your income statement for the financial year ending 30 June 2020 is now available. And there are a couple of links within the email that may be helpful for the employees. Now, the employees can access their income statements via the ATO Online Services myGov account. Now, if they don't have a myGov account, they can click this link here, and that will take them to an ATO link with instructions on how to create a myGov account. And then also down the bottom here, we've got another link which has just got some other general information about STP from an employee's view. Now, if an employee can't create or access a myGov account for some reason, they can request their income statement directly from the ATO. Now, another thing also to note is that the employees will not be able to access their income statements via the payroll employee portal either. Now, this includes WorkZone as well. So previously, employees were able to access their payment summaries from their employee portal, but this is no longer the case with regard to income statements. Okay, so we'll just head back over to the payroll dashboard. Okay, so now that we've covered off checking all of our business employee level settings, we've processed that finalisation event and sent out those notifications to our employees. I'm just going to now cover off a few miscellaneous items that we need to mention. Now, the first of which is deleting a finalisation event. So if you do create a finalisation event in error, there is an option to delete the finalisation event. So what I'll do is I'll create another finalisation event for a different pay schedule, and then I'll show you how you can delete that event. So I'll just also quickly mention at this point here, when selecting a pay schedule, if you do have multiple pay schedules set up in the payroll file, you will need to do a finalisation event for each of those pay schedules separately. But this only includes the pay schedules that are actually assigned to an employee as their primary pay schedule. So if you have, say, an ad hoc pay schedule set up that you really only use to pay bonuses and that sort of thing, this will not need to be finalised if that pay schedule is not actually assigned to any employees as that employee's primary pay schedule. So I'll just select the monthly pay schedule here and then next. Now, if you've gotten to this point and this is a pay schedule that has been created in error, what we can do is we can just click on the Save for Later option. And then back here on the Single Touch Payroll page, instead of continuing the finalisation, we can just open up the actual event. And then this is where the Delete Finalisation option will be. So then you can just delete that finalisation if it's one that you didn't need. Now, the next thing I'll need to show you is how to do an amended finalisation event. So if you have already successfully lodged your finalisation event for a particular pay schedule, and then you found something that needed to be changed, you can make the adjustment, and then in order to update the end of year totals with the ATO, you'll need to lodge an amended finalisation event. So to do this, on the Single Touch Payroll page here, you'll see a drop-down arrow next to the Start Finalisation process, and this is where you can find the Create an Amended Finalisation event. So this process is very similar to the actual finalisation event process that we've just covered. So you will firstly need to make sure the financial year has been selected correctly. Then you can select the pay schedule that you'd like to do the amended event for. And then you'll now see a different option appear, which will allow you to select the employees that you would like to include in the amended event. So the event will default to include all of the employees that are attached to the pay schedule that you've selected, or you can click on that drop-down menu and select only specific employees. So if there are only a couple of specific employees that you've made adjustments to that you need to update, you can just add those particular employees into the amended finalisation event. You can then click on Next, and this will create that amended finalisation event with those selected employees included. And then from here, the process is exactly the same as the finalisation event. You can enter in your reportable fringe benefits amounts if required, and then you'll need to acknowledge and authorise that declaration and then lodge your... So we'll go back to the event details screen, so I can show you the difference now between a finalisation event and an amended finalisation event. So we'll just close that while that event's being submitted. Go back to the Single Touch Payroll page, and then here you can see the finalisation event for that weekly pay schedule, and then above that you've got the finalisation event, which is an amended one. So that's how you can tell the difference between those two. Okay, so the last few things that I'm going to mention in today's webinar are some ATO deadlines. Your finalisation declaration needs to be lodged by the 14th of July each year. If you've only just started reporting to the ATO via Single Touch Payroll in the 2019-2020 financial year, you will have an extended due date, which is until the 31st of July 2020. If you are unsure of the deadline that applies to your own situation, it's always best to contact the ATO directly for confirmation. And then I'll just mention again also the follow-up email that we're going to send out after today's webinar. That email is going to include a recording of today's presentation. We'll also have the end of financial year guide and the end of financial year frequently asked questions document as well. This presentation will also be uploaded to our YouTube channel, so you can jump over there to our YouTube channel and have a look at the webinar as well. Now, we will be hanging around for a few more minutes at the end of the webinar now. If you do have any more questions, you can pop them up there in the Q&A section, and we will go through and answer any of those before we log off the webinar today. But thank you all very much for attending, and I hope you enjoyed today's presentation and got some useful information. Thank you. Bye now.